The FBI investigator vanished on night shift. 7 years later, agents found this in an old archive. This happened in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, a small city where you're more likely to hear about antique shops or Amish tours than federal disappearances. The FBI doesn't advertise their presence in places like this, but they're always there, in some form. Sometimes quietly embedded in local law enforcement. Sometimes operating out of leased office space with no signage. In this case, it was a satellite unit, officially listed as part of the Bureau's Regional Forensics Task Group. And officially, it had another purpose. Something only a handful of agents were assigned to. And one of those agents was Elijah Rowe. Rowe wasn't high profile. No medals, no media appearances. He wasn't the kind of agent you noticed. And that's probably why they picked him for the Lancaster post. Former homicide detective from Pittsburgh PD, later absorbed into the Bureau after a 2011 joint operation cracked open a series of missing persons cases tied to a retired Army contractor. Rowe had a reputation for being methodical, quiet, and deeply intuitive. One supervisor called him a human tape recorder, someone who remembered everything, even the way someone's shoes sounded on concrete. He also didn't ask questions. At least, not the kind that made other people uncomfortable. In the spring of 2014, Rowe was assigned to overnight records monitoring for the Lancaster unit. The official task was reviewing and digitizing legacy evidence logs from small PDs in the region. But something about the operation never sat right with a few of the local officers. For one, the archive facility they used wasn't a real Bureau building. It was a decommissioned DMV storage center on the edge of the city, retrofitted with security systems and blackout window treatments. And second, no one was ever allowed inside except the agents assigned to it. Not even janitorial staff. When the night shift started, the doors were locked from the inside. Only 2 agents had key access. Rowe was one of them. He clocked in at 10:02 p.m. on April 9, 2014. Security footage showed him entering through the south entrance, swiping his badge, and walking down the hallway toward the records bay. Nothing unusual. He carried a thermos in one hand and a messenger bag slung over his shoulder. He never came out. The footage ended at 10:17 p.m. Power surge, the report said. Likely caused by nearby storm interference. But the weather log for that night showed clear skies. The power was back by 10:21, but Rowe was gone. At 6:00 a.m., the morning shift arrived. The doors were still locked from the inside. His workstation light was on. Coffee half full. Computer logged in. Documents mid-scan. But no sign of Elijah Rowe. His phone was left on the desk. His badge was still active in the system. His vehicle was in the lot. He'd simply vanished. The Bureau issued a formal statement that same week: an internal employee has been reported missing. Foul play is not suspected at this time. No media briefings. No photos. No request for public assistance. The case was folded into a broader personnel transfer and reassignment file. But locals noticed. One officer, who later spoke anonymously, said that after the disappearance, federal officials spent 3 days tearing up the floor of the facility's northwest corridor. They brought in ground-penetrating radar, he said. Not to look for him. To look for something else. I swear to God they already knew he wasn't there. Then came the rumors. That Rowe had discovered something buried in the files he was scanning. That he left a message in a corrupted USB drive. That his last login triggered a cascade of locked files marked observation only. Nothing confirmed. But the whispers never really stopped. The facility was shuttered that July. Officially for structural deficiencies. It was never reopened. 7 years later, in June of 2021, a maintenance crew working in a sealed section of the FBI's Philadelphia field office made a discovery. The room hadn't been used since 1989, back when it served as a cold case evidence storage annex. It was sealed off during asbestos removal and quietly forgotten. Or at least that's the story they were told. While replacing outdated HVAC lines, a contractor noticed that one wall sounded hollow. Not the usual hollow, but wrong. Different. When tapped, it echoed, like there was space behind it. He reported it. A team was dispatched. When the drywall was removed, they found a false panel. And behind it, a small, temperature-stable cavity, no more than 5 feet wide. Inside that space was a plastic bin, sealed with forensic tape. The tape was bureau-issued, marked with a serial format no longer in use. Inside the bin, Elijah Rowe's uniform, neatly folded. His badge. His thermos. His field notebook, still dry. And a flash drive, labeled in pen, not a suicide. Everything was tagged, documented, transferred to internal affairs. And then everything went silent again. But some files slipped through the cracks. The internal report described the flash drive as inconclusive, citing corrupted data and unresolvable formatting inconsistencies. But that wasn't the full story. An agent, one of the newer ones, not yet seasoned enough to look away, had copied the contents of the drive before it was sealed. No official record exists of that copy. What's known comes from a short-lived encrypted message thread leaked onto an internal forum that was promptly wiped. The flash drive contained a series of images, scans of documents Rowe had apparently been digitizing the week of his disappearance. Most looked innocuous at first: arrest records, evidence tags, transfer memos. But several files had something odd in common. A reference code, B27INS9. That sequence didn't appear in any bureau system. Not in criminal databases. Not in archived federal logs. Not in pre-9/11 or post-Patriot Act schemas. It wasn't shorthand for a district, division, or even a protocol. No one knew what it meant. Or if they did, they didn't say. But Rowe had circled it. On every page. Bright red ink. Sometimes underlined twice. Sometimes scrawled next to it, not evidence, witness, or cross-check against 498's manifest. In one instance, it was next to the name of a missing teenager from Maryland. In another, it was tagged on a seemingly unrelated warehouse fire in West Virginia. None of the documents should have intersected. Different states. Different timelines. Different departments. But they all had that code. The agent who leaked the information, whose identity was never officially confirmed, added one note of his own. He was building a pattern. One that wasn't supposed to be built. These weren't just cases, they were field assignments. Something was being moved. Tracked. Observed. But not by us. He also included a scan of one final note found inside the bin. It wasn't cataloged in the recovery log. It wasn't mentioned in the official summary. It was written on bureau letterhead, folded twice, slightly water-damaged but legible. It read, "If this is being read, I was right. They're not watching us. They're watching who we watch. And if you're reading this, you're next in line." After that, the forum vanished. Access denied. Accounts frozen. The employee who posted the leak was reassigned, quietly, without announcement. Some believe they were let go. Others think they were moved to one of the Bureau's deep evaluation units, the ones without public addresses. But the questions remained. Who sealed Rowe's belongings behind a false wall in a closed federal archive? Why were the items untouched, no trace of decay or environmental wear? And how did his field notebook contain entries dated 3 months after his disappearance? That detail wasn't released to anyone. Not even internally. But it leaked through a contractor who helped scan the pages for analysis. The final pages in Rowe's notebook were dated July 2014 to 90 days after he vanished. The handwriting matched. The ink was fresh. The entries grew shorter as they went. First. Can't tell if it's day or night anymore. Sound seems to shift when I move. Then, they said it's not punishment. Said I'm part of the next phase. And finally, in scrawled, shaking lines, I'm still in the building. Not their building. Ours. But it's different now. It's like it remembers me. The last page was blank, except for a crude drawing of a floor plan. It didn't match any existing bureau office. Except one. A former underground annex used during the Cold War, a location no longer in use, according to all federal documentation. But old engineers still remembered it. Tunnels. Walls 3 feet thick. No external access. Sealed since the early 90s. That site was reopened 3 months after Roe's case was reclassified. But no public record exists of what, if anything, was found inside. There was one man who did remember the annex. His name wasn't widely known, not even within the Bureau. Harold Kinsey. Former facility engineer, retired in 1996 after over 3 decades managing off-books infrastructure. He lived alone in a small town just outside Scranton, kept no phone, and declined all pension interviews. The only reason his name surfaced again was because one of the last entries in Elijah Roe's notebook mentioned it, scribbled at the edge of a page like a side thought. K. says they only locked it from one side. It wasn't a name the Bureau had associated with the annex in Philadelphia. But cross-referencing old blueprints and construction contracts turned it up. Kinsey had overseen the electrical system during the 1973 retrofit of Sublevel 3. A team was sent to find him. They didn't find Kinsey. They found his house, door open, coffee still warm, TV on static. No sign of struggle. Just absence. The kind that doesn't feel natural. Neighbors said he hadn't spoken much to anyone in years. One remembered him muttering something the week before about hearing the lights turn back on. Whatever that meant. The FBI made no public statement. Not about Kinsey. Not about Roe. But quietly, behind closed doors, the Bureau reopened the annex. They called it Environmental Assessment and Containment Survey, but the few who had access knew better. They weren't testing for mold. They weren't checking radiation. They were looking for something. The annex itself sat beneath an unmarked building in South Philadelphia, listed in federal maps as a records intake facility, but with no functioning office in over 25 years. The top 2 floors were gutted, stripped of wiring, windows covered with sheet metal. But below, there were stairs. Narrow. Creaking like they remembered every boot that had ever descended. The team sent inside consisted of 6 agents, 2 engineers, and 1 quiet man with no name badge, no rank, and no introduction. He didn't carry a gun. Just a tablet and a long aluminum case. They began at level 1. Dust. Mold. Water damage. Nothing unusual. Then level 2. Power was cut, but their equipment picked up faint impulses. One of the agents, Rios, said it felt like the walls were breathing. He asked to be reassigned the following day. Records show he checked into a psychiatric evaluation facility 2 weeks later. No further notes. Level 3 is where it changed. That's where the team found the door. Steel. Seamless. No handles. Just a vertical slit at shoulder height, like something meant to scan something. But nothing on the team had the clearance. Not even the unnamed observer. They drilled around the frame. Looking for mechanical triggers. Nothing. Not until one of the engineers, Meyer, said something strange. It's not locked. It's waiting. He refused to explain what he meant. Instead, he walked up to the slit, pulled off his glove, and pressed his hand flat against it. The lights flickered. And the door slid open. Inside was a chamber, square, silent, dry. In the center, a single chair. Facing a wall. On the wall, a mirror. But not just a mirror, it was wrong. It didn't reflect the room. It didn't reflect the agents. It didn't reflect anything. It was black. Not like tinted glass, but like a void, like it absorbed the light instead of bouncing it back. The unnamed observer stepped forward, pointed his tablet toward it, and tapped once. That's when the static started. Not loud, not harsh, just present, like white noise fed through layers of concrete. One of the agents, Carver, turned toward the exit and froze. She swore, later, that she saw someone standing outside the chamber, inside the hallway they'd just cleared. A man, wearing bureau uniform. No face. Just a blurred shape, like a memory smeared across a window. She blinked, and it was gone. They left the chamber that night. Sealed it. Tagged it unstable perception zone. But one member of the team never filed their final report. The unnamed observer. He walked back into the chamber before dawn and never came out. Security footage, grainy and incomplete, shows the door closing behind him. No one touched it. No one opened it again. When they tried. 2 days later, the slit was gone. Like it had never been there. And here's the part that wasn't shared outside that team. When they pulled the footage from the annex, just before the door vanished, in the few frames between the observer walking in and the system crashing, they saw it. On the mirror. For just a second. A reflection. Not of the chamber. Not of the team. Of a different room. One with an old desk. Stacks of folders. A mug with a crack in the handle. And a man sitting at the desk. Wearing an FBI badge. Elijah Rowe. They weren't supposed to be in that part of the building. The Philadelphia field office had dozens of rooms no one used anymore. Most were old evidence rooms, cold case cabinets, or outdated file storage left behind from before digitization. This one, Room B18, had been sealed since 1989 after a leak in the ceiling compromised the ceiling tiles. Officially, it was marked for demolition during the next major renovation, which never came. But in February 2021, a low-level internal security audit flagged unusual M fluctuations coming from the room. At first, it was dismissed as interference from the server floor 1 level up. But then a janitor, not even part of the bureau, just a subcontracted night crew worker, made a call. He'd been checking the ceiling outside room B18 when he noticed a change in the air pressure near the sealed wall. Like something was pressing from the inside. When the Bureau's internal facilities team was called to inspect, they found the drywall looked newer than expected, not like a 1980s install, but like it had been patched more recently. There were no records of recent maintenance. They cut the wall open at 7:43 p.m. Behind it, an empty cavity. Silent. Sealed. No air vents. No lights. And in the center, a heavy bureau-grade storage bin. It was coated in a thin layer of dust, but the tape was pristine. Bureau Forensic Seal. Serial code issued under a format last used in 2012. Inside, folded with clinical precision, was Elijah Rowe's FBI uniform. His original nameplate. His badge. His service weapon, unloaded but intact. His notepad, still sealed in its weatherproof sleeve. A cassette tape labeled personnel error in red marker. And an internal clearance key card, coded to a section of the Bureau no longer listed in the network. They called for a hard lockdown of the floor within minutes. The official report said the items were discovered during routine records cleanup. But unofficially, everyone knew. There had been no access to that section for 7 years. Rowe had vanished in Lancaster in 2014, and now his effects had surfaced hundreds of miles away, inside a sealed archive room no one had touched since the Cold War. No fingerprints. No DNA traces. And no explanation for how the tape recorder, built in 2003, had a recording dated August 17, 2014. That was 4 months after Elijah Rowe was declared missing. The tape wasn't easy to play. The Bureau hadn't used cassette recorders in nearly 2 decades. They had to track down an old player from a retired field kit. When they played it, the audio was distorted, high-pitched in places, warped like it had been recorded too close to a power source. But the voice was his. No question. Rowe was speaking fast. Panicked. If this gets found, if this actually makes it back into hands that still have access, listen carefully. It's not a building. It's a shell. They built it over something that already existed. The floors don't line up. The halls shift. It's not about the records. It's about the ones that rid them. The audio cuts for a few seconds. Then continues. Every name in that manifest has been marked. I thought it was coincidence. Bad luck. But it's not. It's designed. Structured. They're watching patterns, not people. Behavior clusters. Someone told me once, you're not being tracked for what you did. You're being tracked for what you almost did. I thought they were crazy. I don't anymore. He pauses. Breathing hard. I don't know how long I've been here. Feels like days. But my watch hasn't moved. I think I'm in sub-level 3, but not ours. The lights hum differently. The exits don't match. And when I look at the mirror in the observation bay, I see myself sitting in different clothes. Writing notes I haven't written yet. Silence. Then just before the tape ends, his voice returns, quiet this time. Tell Kinsey I remember the staircase. Tell him I didn't fall. Click. Tape ends. The name Kinsey appeared again. That was the second time. Only this time, there was a last name attached. Harold Kinsey, the same former engineer mentioned in the notebook that had surfaced months earlier. By the time agents reached his home, he was already gone. Vanished without a trace. Inside his house, though, they found something else. Tucked inside a hollowed-out dictionary, a map. Hand-drawn. Detailed. Familiar. A floor plan. And in the bottom right corner, written in small, trembling letters. There is a door that remembers. It only opens when it's forgotten. If you're wondering why none of this ever made the news, it did. Just not in the way that matters. There was a story in the morning call about asbestos testing at an old federal building. A brief mention in a bureau quarterly about ongoing infrastructure compliance. A line in a budget report citing containment efforts. But no mention of Elijah Rowe. No mention of a storage bin sealed in drywall. And definitely no mention of a cassette tape that knew things it shouldn't. But the people in the building, the ones who passed that sealed room every day without knowing what was behind it, they remember. Some say they still hear clicking behind that new patch of drywall. Like a cassette rewinding itself. And some say they dream of a room they've never entered, a chair, a mirror, a humming that doesn't come from any machine. If you ask questions, they'll say it's nothing. Just power fluctuations. Old systems. Bad wiring. But every now and then, when the hallway is quiet, someone walks a little faster past room B18. And no one ever asks why it was sealed again, this time with 6 bolts and no label. Some agents said the humming never stopped. They just stopped admitting they heard it. Room B18 was resealed with bureau-grade steel reinforcement, double insulation, and internal motion sensors routed to an off-network drive, one that didn't sync with standard bureau surveillance logs. Only 2 people had access to the sensor data, Assistant Deputy Director Monroe and a man named Martin Kell. Assigned under a clearance designation that no longer exists on any current FBI roster. Monroe never commented publicly. Kell never showed up on internal payroll. But his name started appearing in access logs across multiple bureau properties, briefly, for minutes at a time, always near locations with long-forgotten storage units, decommissioned server rooms, or transfer archives from the late 80s. Wherever his badge pinged, someone started asking questions. And shortly after, that someone usually submitted a resignation. One of them didn't. Her name was Agent Nadia Voss. Mid-30s. former cybercrime specialist, transferred to the Cold Case Task Force in 2019 after her supervisor flagged her for excessive data correlation outside primary assignment. In other words, she noticed things. Voss had become obsessed with Rowe's case. And officially, there was no file anymore, just scattered documents, flagged by redactions so dense they blacked out whole pages. But Voss had a theory: the tape, the false wall. The timeline anomalies, they weren't errors. They were insertions. She believed someone, or something, was putting the evidence back in. Rowe's belongings had been returned, not discovered. She called it the echo pattern. She started building timelines, not based on when agents vanished, but when their items returned. Some examples. Agent Matthew Reed disappeared in 2007. His weapon reappeared in a locked cabinet during a 2013 equipment audit. Cabinet had been sealed since 2005. Analyst Christine Lang, last seen 2011. Her login credentials were used on an internal network in 2016 at a terminal stored in a warehouse in Utah. That warehouse had been without power for 4 years. Elijah Rowe vanished in 2014. His tape-labeled personnel error surfaced in 2021. But Voss noticed the cassette model it was recorded on didn't enter bureau field kits until late 2016. Impossible timelines. Consistent return patterns. Always to isolated places. Always through locked doors. She compiled her findings in an internal memo, never sent officially. It was found 6 weeks later on a printer tray in a disused records room at Quantico. No print job was recorded. The memo had no digital footprint. Just the following handwritten across the top. This version remembers. Seal accordingly. Shortly after, Voss was reassigned. Not to another division. Not to desk work. She was moved to Building H. That's what they called it. Not an official site. No paperwork. Just a name whispered by techs who worked too close to things they weren't supposed to understand. Building H was rumored to be where agents went when they needed to be convinced they were wrong. Or when someone needed them to forget. But Voss didn't forget. Her notes kept surfacing. One showed up in a field tech's equipment bag in Kansas City. Another was slipped into a training manual for new agents in Seattle. Each contained fragments of a map, numbered coordinates, and a phrase. Sub-level 3 is not below us. It's beside us. And then something changed. July 2022, Philadelphia. A junior clerk named Dylan Shepard, assigned to digital archive prep, noticed something strange on a legacy backup tape. A scanned record of 1993 field communications, labeled under a corruption index. The file was supposed to be unreadable. But when he ran a checksum on the metadata, it bounced back one line. Rowe_Elijah, update confirmed. Retained. He flagged it. Sent it to his supervisor. The next day, Shepard didn't show up for work. His apartment was untouched. No forced entry. No travel record. No pings from his phone. But in the bureau system, his status was changed. Voluntary leave no re-entry. That designation didn't exist in Bureau Hour. Except for one other person. Elijah Rowe. At this point, someone started cleaning. Logs were purged. Old reports overwritten. All mentions of sub-level 3 scrubbed from archives. But not everyone was blind. A small group, 4 agents, including a retired profiler and a surveillance systems engineer, started compiling their own records. They didn't call it an investigation. They called it a reconstruction. They believed Rowe had stumbled into something not meant to be documented, not a program, not a conspiracy, but a place. A recursive spatial structure embedded in older bureau properties. Not supernatural. Not demonic. Just wrong. Places with layouts that didn't make sense. Rooms that weren't measured correctly. Doors that opened into hallways no blueprint ever included. And mirrors, always mirrors. They tracked 17 disappearances linked to these places. And 11 reappearances. Not of people. Of objects. Always after 7 years. Always undamaged. Always too clean. Like they'd been stored in vacuum. One of them, Agent Morales, said it best. It's not that they're being taken. It's that the Bureau was built on top of something. Something older. Something that doesn't forget. Something that eventually gives things back. They say the Bureau forgets what it wants to forget. It forgets failed operations, redacted programs, disavowed agents. It forgets names, files, and sometimes entire buildings. But it never forgets patterns. And that's what Rowe had found. A pattern buried so deeply in outdated forms, misfiled evidence, and shuttered field offices that no one was supposed to see it anymore. Except he did. The unofficial reconstruction team, Morales, Whitner, Dreyfus, and retired profiler Dana Krill, operated out of a cabin outside Harrisburg. Not a safe house. Just a place with no cameras, no signal boosters, and no access logs. Morales brought the hardware, Dreyfus coded the tools, and Krill, she brought the memory. Because she'd been there before. Back in I-95, she was assigned to a warehouse break-in in Detroit, nothing major. Just a vandalized regional archive. But when she got there, it wasn't just property damage. A wall had collapsed, revealing a space no one knew existed. And in that space was an old field box, rusted, locked, unremarkable. Inside, a single item. A badge. Issued to an agent who hadn't even joined the Bureau yet. Elijah Rowe. Krill was told it was a misprint. A practical joke. But she never forgot it. 20 years later, when Rowe vanished, the name struck her like lightning. She tried to raise it. No one listened. So she filed it away. Until the tape surfaced. Until the archive room was unsealed. Until the photos started circulating. Rowe's uniform. The old map. The drawing of the mirror. The scribbled note, "They're watching who we watch." It all connected. Whitner, the systems engineer, tracked residual network pings from sites where Rowe's belongings had reappeared. In every case, there was a power draw from non-existent server addresses. Always at 2:13 a.m., always 12 minutes apart. Always originating from terminals physically disconnected from the grid. He described it as phantom routing. Like something inside the system pretending to be human access. But never leaving fingerprints. Never modifying files. Just observing. The team's theory was this. There was a layer of the Bureau's infrastructure, architectural, digital, procedural, that wasn't created intentionally. It emerged. Over time. Like mold under wallpaper. Only instead of decay, it was memory. A kind of structural echo. And every time someone tried to catalog it, trace it, quantify it, they disappeared. Rowe had seen it and left traces behind. And now something else was trying to reassemble itself from those traces. In October 2022, Morales received a package at his cabin. No return address. Inside, a Polaroid. Grainy, slightly overexposed. But unmistakable. It showed sub-level 3. A wall lined with shelves. And a figure standing between them. Rowe. Same badge. Same face. Same thermos on the desk. But the timestamp on the back? The 9th of April 2014, 10:17 p.m. That was the exact time the surveillance feed had cut out the night he vanished. That image couldn't exist. It hadn't been taken by any known device. No known Bureau-issued camera from that era produced Polaroids. It was like the building had taken it and somehow mailed it back. Morales scanned it. Checked the emulsion, the chemical aging. It was real. But it hadn't aged. 7 years in pristine condition. Stored somewhere controlled. Below the photo, someone had written a phrase in trembling, familiar handwriting. Don't look for me. Look for where they buried the original. That line changed everything. Because if what Rowe meant was what they feared, that the real bureau had been covered up, buried beneath years of policy and construction, then this wasn't about a man vanishing. It was about a version of reality being overwritten. And Rowe? He wasn't just lost. He might have been the last person who remembered which version was real. They tried to locate Sub-Level 3 again. Not the one at the Philadelphia Annex, the original. The one drawn on the edge of Rowe's notebook. The one Kinsey whispered about. The one Krill saw years before it was supposed to exist. It wasn't listed in any schematics. But Dreyfus, digging through analog tape backups from 1990s field reports, found something hidden in misaligned printer headers. A 6-digit code repeated across 12 reports. 990,213. At first, they thought it was a case ID. Then they realized it was a date. February 13, 1999. The same day a bureau-wide server migration was initiated. The same day a dozen physical field records were destroyed due to a malfunction. And the last day on record for 3 agents, none of whom were listed as missing, but who simply stopped appearing. The team called in a favor. A retired bureau architect had access to original blueprints of several Cold War-era facilities, including a decommissioned relay site in Virginia. There, buried under 3 renovations, they found a partial sub-level layout, incomplete and labeled. But it matched Rowe's sketch. Same number of stairs. Same hallway turn. Same mirror chamber. They went there. At night. No permission. No backup. Just flashlights, old maps, and Rowe's last drawing. The site was technically condemned, surrounded by forest, wrapped in fencing so rusted it crumbled when touched. Inside, the air was damp. The corridors still lined with lead shielding. Every room was empty. Until they reached the hallway. That hallway. Just like the sketch. Morales went first. Then Krill. Then Whitner and Dreyfus. At the end of the hall, the mirror. Still intact. Still wrong. And in the reflection? Not themselves. Not the chamber. But a room with shelves. Folders stacked high. And on the desk, a tape recorder. One of the old ones. The kind the Bureau stopped issuing in 2006. Whitner raised his camera. Took one photo. Then the lights cut out. All 4 made it out. No one injured. But when Whitner developed the photo, the mirror was gone. And on the desk was Rowe's badge, resting on a folded page. Dreyfus enhanced the image, printed it, and read what was written in faint pen. I remember all of you. The photo was verified by 3 independent analysts. Same badge number. Same handwriting. Same impossible location. The Bureau never officially contacted Morales' team. But within days of the photo being developed, Krill's car was found outside a gas station on Route 322. Empty. Doors unlocked. Inside, her field notes were stacked neatly on the passenger seat, bound with Bureau issue tape. Her phone was missing. Her Bureau ID had been sliced in half and left on the dash. Surveillance footage showed her stepping inside the store at 2:06 a.m. She never came back out. Not through the door. Not through the back. Not even into the storage area. 1 second she was browsing bottled water, the next frame was empty. Glitch, they said. Camera lag. But the cashier remembered her. Remembered what she asked. Do you have mirrors in your restrooms? He said no. She smiled. Left the water. Walked to the back. Then nothing. Morales took it personally. Krill had warned him 2 days earlier. If you look too long, the building starts looking back. He didn't understand then. He did now. Dreyfus wanted out. Whitner started having dreams. Always the same hallway, always the same sound, like a reel spinning with no tape. Morales told them one thing before they scattered. If they put him back in, they'll try to pull us in next. Keep moving. And if you ever see the chair, don't sit down. He went dark after that. No phone. No GPS. Just one post, uploaded to a private whistleblower forum 3 weeks later under the name Row 990213. The post read, "It's not recursion. It's not a loop. It's a holding pattern. They place us where we can't affect outcome. We become reference material. Not people. The form isn't a uniform. It's an access key. The badge tells the walls who we were." Then, a file attachment. It contained audio. Not Rowe. Not Morales. A voice. Older, rasping, methodical. It repeated the same phrase 5 times. "The Bureau does not create doors. It discovers them." Then a static burst. And silence. The forum shut down 2 hours later. Domain deleted. DNS records erased. Archived version blocked. But the file survived. Someone mirrored it. It spread quietly. And then the dream started. First to former Bureau agents. Then to others, people who had never worked in law enforcement, but who had passed through certain places. Certain buildings. Old courthouses. Closed post offices. Mental health facilities converted into city records offices. One woman, an EMT from upstate New York, claimed she walked into a records room during a supply run and found a second hallway where there hadn't been one before. It was narrow. Bare bulbs. A mirror at the end. She turned around and left immediately. The next day, she received a package at her home. No return address. Inside, a bureau badge. Her name engraved. But she'd never worked for the FBI. By late 2023, there were too many stories to ignore. Not official reports, but field-level refusals. Agents requesting transfers from buildings where the layout keeps changing. Reports of elevator shafts leading to sealed floors. Mirrors that showed outdated furniture arrangements. And then one truly strange incident in Seattle. A fire alarm triggered in a closed archive vault. When the door was opened, responders found a tape recorder still running. The model hadn't been manufactured in over a decade. The tape was full. 90 minutes. The voice? Elijah Rowe. Talking. Reading names. Dates. And between each one, a phrase repeated like a ritual. Observed. Held. Deferred. By now, unofficial teams formed on their own. Cross-divisional task forces composed of those who had seen just enough to believe, but not enough to disappear. They tracked these phenomena, marked new locations, mapped out sightings of rooms that shouldn't exist. They started calling it the archive layer. Not a physical place. A hidden pattern of bureau architecture, code, and memory that seemed to exist just outside protocol. Not supernatural. Not even anomalous. But deeply, mechanically wrong. And every 7 years, it leaked. In objects. In photos. In clothes found sealed behind walls. In rooms that still had the scent of someone who shouldn't be gone. And the leak was increasing. Where once it was one agent every decade. Now it was happening annually. Small things, still. Tape recorders, outdated memos, unfiled reports showing up in rooms never listed in floor plans. But always with one constant. The signature on the form. E. Rowe. And one word stamped in red. Retained. They say the last time someone saw Morales, he was sitting outside a municipal records office in Delaware, just staring at the exit door. When someone asked if he needed help, he replied, "No. I just want to see if it opens from the inside this time." He wasn't there the next day. But the bench was warm. And in the wastebasket beside it, someone found a folded piece of paper. On it, the sketch of a hallway. Same as Rowe's. Same as Kinsey's. Same as the mirror floor plan. But this time, at the end of the hall, the chair was facing the mirror. And it was empty. For now. They kept the chair in the final sketch under lock and key. Dreyfus scanned the drawing, ran it through pattern analysis, overlaid it with every known bureau subfloor. Nothing matched, until it did. Not with architecture. With personnel flow. Rowe's last 20 assignments, plotted over 7 years, matched the hallway shape perfectly. Every stop, every interview, every evidence retrieval. Even vacation time. It wasn't a map of a place. It was a recording of behavior. His movement, his pattern. His trajectory through the bureau itself. And the chair? It wasn't in a location. It was in a moment. The others didn't want to accept it. Whitner left the group shortly after the correlation model was finished. He moved west, bought a cabin, disconnected. Last thing he said to Dreyfus was, "I think it's choosing who gets remembered." Dreyfus stayed in the cabin outside Harrisburg. He'd stopped sleeping. His email history showed nightly messages, never sent, written to names from old bureau payroll sheets. Agents who didn't exist anymore. Agents whose files had been purged. The messages were all variations of one sentence. "Do you remember where your desk was?" Some were longer. Some had file attachments, PDFs of blueprints, raw security logs, AI-interpolated facial scans from 1990s CCTV. One file was labeled B18_inner.avi, a low-res video taken from a handheld device pointed at a plain wall. Then static. Then the sound of footsteps. Slow. Even. Like pacing inside a sealed space. On frame 327, a shape emerged. No face. No badge. Just bureau standard black suit. Just the mirror. And then, just before the footage cut, a voice. He's not gone. He's just waiting for his case to reopen. That was the last file Dreyfus uploaded. 3 days later, his system wiped itself. Manually. Someone triggered a secure erase from inside the machine, overriding the BIOS. He was found on the floor, conscious but non-responsive. In his hand, a paper scrap. A typed sentence, clean font. Classic bureau letterhead format. Case file row. Elijah retention cycle restarted. By early 2024, something else began happening. Agents still active in the field started receiving mail at old addresses. Burned out apartments. Dormant P.O. boxes. All from the same name. E. Rowe. Federal Records Compliance. Return if undeliverable. Inside, flash drives. All encrypted. All requiring access codes that didn't exist anymore. Codes tied to buildings demolished in the 1990s. And always the same label on the outside of the envelope. Supplemental Evidence Observation Only B27INS9. That code. The same code Rowe had circled a dozen times before he vanished. Some of the drives were destroyed. Others were quietly passed between trusted hands. A few were decoded. The contents varied. Old case file PDFs, transcribed interviews, grainy surveillance audio. But one file was found in every drive. Mirror_log_0.txt. It contained names. Thousands. Alphabetical order. Some were current agents. Some retired. Some were unborn. The list continued far past the expected index. The last line? Rowe, Elijah. Present. Not missing. Not deceased. Not recovered. Present. At that point, Whitner returned. Just walked back into Dreyfus's cabin one morning as if nothing had happened. He looked thinner, eyes darker. He carried a tape recorder. It was already playing. No power. No battery. Still playing. It repeated one line over and over. Archive room B18 is not sealed. It is paused. He placed the recorder on the table. Sat down and said, I saw it open. Not physically. It's like a choice. You get to choose if it stays closed. But you only get to choose once. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Dreyfus asked, "Did you see him?" Whitner didn't answer. He just handed over a photo. Another Polaroid. This time, the hallway. The chair. The mirror. And a reflection. Rowe again. But not just sitting. Smiling. Not wide. Not deranged. Just peaceful. Like someone who had accepted their post. On the back of the photo, scrawled in rushed ink, "He's not inside the bureau. The bureau is inside him now." There's no formal bureau record of Rowe anymore. His ID has been scrubbed from system logbooks. His field reports are gone. Internal training documents that cited his cases have been reissued without his name. But the things tied to him still reappear. A clipboard with his handwriting found in a disused stairwell in Chicago. A mug with his fingerprint retrieved from a sealed locker in Arizona. A note in his voice, printed out of a fax machine that hadn't had paper in years. And always the uniform, crisp, unaged, found folded inside places that haven't been entered in decades. The last sighting came from a janitor in a New York field office. She didn't know who Rowe was. Didn't follow bureau rumors. She just filed a report. Said she saw a man in an old-style badge uniform sitting quietly in an unused meeting room, staring at the blank whiteboard. She looked away for a second. Looked back. He was gone. But on the table? A folder. Empty. Except for a mirror shard. And a post-it note that said, "It's your turn to sit down." In April 2024, a new agent, 31 years old, fluent in 4 languages, background in digital forensics, reported for his first assignment at a field office in Cleveland. He was assigned an orientation room. They gave him a keycard and told him to go downstairs, sub-level 1A, room 3. Except that room hadn't been used in years. And sub-level 1A didn't have a room 3 anymore. Not on the maps. But the lights were on when he entered. Inside, a chair, a wall-mounted mirror, and a folder on the table. The folder had no name. No case ID. Just a label. Supplemental Review Cycle B27INS9. The same designation Rowe had tracked before he vanished. Inside the folder, 6 photos. All grayscale. All showing the same hallway, slightly different each time. Lights dimmed in different spots. A door open in one. Closed in another. But at the end of each hallway, the same chair. The same mirror. And in every image, just barely visible in the reflection, a man sitting where the photographer should have been. In the last photo, the man was standing. And facing the viewer. There was a note at the bottom. "You're seeing this because you weren't supposed to." The agent filed a report. That report was never logged. 3 days later, he withdrew his application to the Bureau and moved to Montana. But his security badge kept pinging systems, despite being deactivated. It last pinged inside room B18 in Philadelphia. The room was still officially sealed. No one had been inside in years. But when a regional team conducted an unrelated inspection, they found that the internal air pressure had changed. The tape seal was broken. Inside, nothing. Except for a desk, a chair, and a cassette recorder. Still warm. That's when the Bureau stopped talking altogether. No more reports. No more denial. Just quiet replacements of entry-level staff. Just random power audits in buildings with no current tenants. Just environmental containment notices posted for properties that hadn't been occupied in decades. But the signs kept coming. Across the country. Field agents finding tape recorders with nothing on them, until they were played backward. Mirror glass turning black in rooms without electricity. Old bureau memos appearing in printers that were no longer connected to anything. And always the same pattern. Someone vanishes. 7 years pass. Then something comes back. The last known message attributed to Elijah Rowe was discovered in a box of outdated surveillance equipment during a warehouse clearance in Kansas. Handwritten. No header. No signature. Just a torn page from a bureau memo pad, stained in one corner. On it. I wasn't supposed to remember. But I do. I remember the noise the walls made when they locked behind me. I remember the smell of files that never aged. I remember the lights humming differently after midnight. And I remember the chair. Empty when I arrived. Occupied when I left. You think this is about me? It's not. It's about what happens when the Bureau runs out of places to put us. The archive doesn't collect people. It collects unfinished memory. And sooner or later, it remembers you too. The bin where his uniform was found was resealed. Room B18 was re-walled and relabeled. On the blueprints, it no longer exists. But in certain internal directories, if you know where to look, if you know what codes to search, there's still one line that hasn't been erased. Case file. Row. Elijah. Active retained. Not closed. Not solved. Not forgotten. Just retained. Like something the Bureau never fully understood. But couldn't risk deleting. Because it might not be a case. It might be a door. And if the pattern continues, if the mirror shows what it's shown before, then somewhere, in some sealed room in a building long since forgotten, that chair is still there. And the next time someone opens the wall, it might be facing you. End of file. Classified retention record, B27INS9.